Rushing to catch her flight, the businesswoman noticed a beautiful homeless woman with a baby. Taking pity on them, she handed over the keys to her lake house. "I'm flying out for negotiations for 3 months. Live at my place for now." Due to difficult negotiations, the woman returned only after 6 months. Remembering the woman with the baby, she drove to the lake house and turned pale at what she saw. Altha Vance ran a family business she had inherited from her father. At just 25 years old, the weight of the entire company had fallen on her shoulders. She had dedicated her life to work, and as a result, she had never started a family of her own. She only had her mother, who frequently reminded her of how important it was to find a beloved partner, and this irritated her to no end. Altha parked her black sedan in the driveway exactly at 11:40 at night. She leaned her head back against the seat and closed her eyes for a moment. The day had been grueling. Negotiations with vendors had dragged on until evening. Then she had to deal with a crisis at the warehouse, and after that, another 2 hours went into reviewing quarterly reports. 55 is an age when the body no longer forgives such marathons. She looked at her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her dark brown skin showed signs of fatigue. There were faint lines near her temples, and her usually sharp professional hairstyle was slightly frayed at the edges. 30 years ago, when her father handed her the reins of the company, she looked completely different. She was full of energy, ambition, ready to move mountains. Now, every day felt like a battle she had to win just to keep the business afloat. Altha got out of the car, pulled her briefcase from the trunk, and headed for the front door. The house greeted her with dim light in the hallway and silence. No, not complete silence. From the kitchen came the low murmur of the television. Kicking off her heels and hanging up her coat, Altha walked into the kitchen. As expected, her mother, Beatrice Vance, was sitting at the table. A cup of half-finished tea stood before her, and her gaze was fixed on the TV screen, which was showing some health program. "Almost midnight again, and you're just getting in from work," Beatrice said without even turning her head. Her voice sounded tired, but the dissatisfaction in it was unmistakable. "When will you stop torturing yourself and finally breathe? Do you not understand that at your age, rest is important?" Altha felt something tighten inside her. Every evening it was the same thing. Every time, the same words, the same reproachful tone. She walked to the bar, took out a bottle of red wine, and poured herself a glass. "That's enough, Mama." Altha's voice came out louder than she had planned. "I hear these lectures every single day." Beatrice finally tore her eyes away from the television and turned to her daughter. Her face expressed genuine bewilderment. "What lectures? I'm just worried about you. You work like you're cursed. You give yourself no respite." "And have you ever thought about why things turned out this way?" Altha interrupted her, taking a large gulp of wine. The alcohol burned her throat, but she didn't stop. "What do you mean?" Beatrice straightened up in her chair, a look of wariness appearing in her eyes. Altha set the glass on the table and crossed her arms over her chest. It was as if a dam had broken inside her. All the words that had been piling up for years, all the grievances and unspoken accusations, came flooding out. "Does it not matter that it was you and Daddy who made me this way?" Her voice trembled with accumulated emotion. "It was you two who separated me from Julian, claiming he wasn't good enough for me." She grabbed the glass and took several more nervous sips. The wine was already starting to take effect, loosening her tongue and removing her filters. "Julian?" Beatrice asked, surprise reflected on her face. "My God, Altha, that was over 30 years ago. He was a simple student without a dime in his pocket." "He loved me!" Altha shouted. "He genuinely loved me. But you and Daddy convinced me that I deserved better, that he wasn't good enough, that he had no ambition." "We wanted a better life for you," Beatrice began, but her daughter didn't let her finish. "And the next suitor was Daddy's competitor," Altha continued, her voice becoming increasingly cracked. "Too ambitious, you said. He'll strip us of everything, take over the company. And then it was wrong age, or need to think about grad school, or career is more important. She sank onto the chair opposite her mother, tears glinting in her eyes. And then I had to take over the company. Althea's voice dropped to a whisper. Daddy died, and everything crashed down on me. When was I supposed to meet men, when all my time went into keeping the company at a respectable level? When I was grinding for 14 hours a day, just so I wouldn't ruin what Father built? Beatrice sat silently, pressing her lips into a thin line. Her fingers nervously picked at the edge of a napkin. Don't blame us for everything, she finally said, steel entering her voice. We always did everything we could for you. Your father built this company from zero. We wanted you to have a future. And where is this better future? Althea laughed bitterly. Where is it, Mama? I am 55 years old. No husband, no children, no grandchildren that you want to babysit so badly. Only a mother who constantly drives me crazy with her moralizing. Don't you dare speak to me like that. Beatrice rose sharply from her chair. Her face had paled, and her eyes flashed with anger. Don't you dare. I am your mother. So what? Althea stood up too. Does that give you the right to control my life? You ruined it, Mama. You ruined it yourself. You are guilty, Beatrice shouted. You missed your time. No one forced you to slave away for days on end. Other women somehow managed to work and start a family. Other women aren't carrying a multi-million-dollar business on their backs, Althea snapped. Other women don't live with parents who think no one is worthy of their precious daughter. We just wanted you not to make a mistake. A mistake? Althea laughed hysterically. I made a mistake anyway, Mama. I made a mistake when I listened to you. Julian now owns a chain of restaurants in 3 cities. And remember Marcus, Dad's competitor? He has 2 grown children, a successful company, and a happy life. And I am alone. A heavy silence hung in the air. Beatrice sank back onto the chair, as if her strength had left her. You are being unfair, she said quietly. Father and I worked all our lives to give you the very best. Education, the company, this house. I didn't want the company, Althea screamed. I wanted to love and be loved. I wanted children. I wanted to wake up next to a person who holds me, not next to a stack of documents. Then why did you agree to lead the company? Beatrice looked at her daughter with a challenge. No one forced you. How did you not force me? Althea felt the tears finally break through. Daddy lay in the hospital begging me not to let the company fall apart. His life was in this business. And you cried every day saying that if I didn't take control into my own hands, we would lose everything, that Daddy's life would turn to dust. How could I refuse? Beatrice turned away toward the window. Her shoulders were trembling. I didn't know you thought that way, she whispered. Of course you didn't know, Althea answered wearily, wiping her tears. You never asked what I wanted. You always knew better. Althea finished the wine and placed the empty glass on the table. I need to sleep. Important meeting tomorrow. She headed for the kitchen exit, but stopped at the threshold without turning around. You are right about one thing, Mama. I missed my time, but it happened not only because I decided so. It happened because you and Father didn't let me live my own life. Althea went up to her room, closed the door, and leaned her back against it. Downstairs in the kitchen, the light was still on. She realized she couldn't change her mother's mind. Beatrice always believed she was right. Arguing or explaining anything was pointless. This fight, like dozens before it, would change nothing. Tomorrow morning, they would speak coldly and stiffly again, pretending nothing had happened. As always, Althea woke up with a heavy head and a bitter taste in her mouth. The wine yesterday had not been the best idea, especially before an important workday. She looked at the clock. 7 a.m. She needed to get ready. Coming down to the kitchen, Althea discovered her mother wasn't there. Usually, Beatrice got up early and by this time was already sitting at the table with a cup of coffee and the newspaper. The kitchen is empty today. She's probably offended after yesterday, Althea thought, pouring herself coffee from the machine. Guilt gnawed at her from the inside, but she quickly suppressed it. There was no time to deal with family dramas right now. Negotiations with new investors were ahead, and she needed to prepare. She ate a hasty breakfast, left a short note for her mother on the table, "We'll be back late," and drove to work. The office met her with the usual bustle. The receptionist reported on calls. Elias Thorne, her chief of staff, brought a folder of documents for the upcoming meeting. Althea immersed herself in work, trying not to think about yesterday's quarrel. It was around 2 in the afternoon when a call from Martha flashed on her phone. Althea frowned. Martha, the housekeeper, usually didn't disturb her over trifles. "Yes, listening," she answered, continuing to scan documents. "Me, Vance!" Martha's voice sounded alarmed, even frightened. "Mrs. Beatrice is missing." Althea froze, not immediately comprehending what she heard. "How do you mean, missing?" Her heart gave an unpleasant lurch. "I can't find her anywhere." Martha spoke quickly, incoherently. "She wasn't in the kitchen in the morning. I thought she was still sleeping, but when she still hadn't come out by 10, I went to check. The bed is made, she's not in the room. I searched all the rooms, the whole house, looked in the yard. I ran out to the street and called her, but Mrs. Beatrice is nowhere. This is all I need." Althea stood up sharply from the desk, dropping the folder of documents, papers scattered across the floor, but she didn't care. "Martha, are you sure you checked everywhere?" "Absolutely. I even looked in the basement and the garage. Her phone is lying on the nightstand in the bedroom. I'll be there soon." Althea hung up and pressed the intercom button. "Elias, come in immediately." Her assistant appeared in seconds, apparently sensing the anxiety in her voice. "Yes, Ms. Vance?" "Elias, I have unforeseen circumstances." Althea was already gathering items into her bag. Her hands were trembling slightly. "My mother is missing. I need to handle the search immediately. Reschedule all meetings." "Missing? How?" "I don't know." Althea cut him off sharply. "The housekeeper says she hasn't been home since morning." Elias Thorne had been with Althea for 10 years. In that time, they had become not just boss and subordinate, but almost friends. He saw her tense face and understood the seriousness of the situation. "Ms. Vance, can I help with anything? Maybe organize a search party? Or drive with you?" Althea thought for a second, but shook her head. "Not yet. If I need your help, I'll call." She grabbed her bag and coat and practically ran out of the office, leaving a bewildered Elias standing in the middle of the room. On the drive home, Althea replayed all possible scenarios in her head. Where could her mother be? Could she really have been so offended by yesterday's words that she decided to leave? But where? Braking sharply at a traffic light, Althea dialed the number of Elizabeth Barnes, an old friend of her mother's. "Hello," answered a cheerful female voice. "Mrs. Barnes, it's Althea. Is my mother with you?" "No, Althea, honey. Why, did something happen?" Wariness appeared in the woman's voice. "No, everything is fine," Althea lied, not wanting to raise panic prematurely. "I just wondered where she went. Maybe she called you today?" "No, dear. Beatrice and I spoke the day before yesterday. She invited me for tea next week. Is something wrong?" No, everything is good. Thank you." Althea hung up and dialed the next number. Valentina, another friend, also knew nothing. Moreover, she was surprised by the call. "Althea, isn't Beatrice home? Strange. We talked on the phone yesterday. She was planning to tend to the flowers in the greenhouse today. Said she hadn't taken care of the roses in a long time." "Thank you, Mrs. Valentina. If she happens to call you, please let me know immediately." "Of course, child, you're scaring me. Is Beatrice okay?" "Yes, we just missed each other," Althea lied again, and disconnected. Suddenly, it hit her. The cemetery. Her mother often went there, especially when she was upset, or wanted to be in silence. Maybe after yesterday's fight, she went to her husband's grave. Althea turned the car around and headed toward the cemetery. The drive took 20 minutes, which felt like an eternity. Anxious thoughts swarmed in her head. What if Mama felt unwell? What if something happened to her? "I shouldn't have spoken to her like that yesterday," Althea thought bitterly. "I shouldn't have snapped. She's 79. She has a heart condition." The cemetery met her with silence and the rustle of autumn leaves. Althea practically ran along the familiar paths to her father's grave. Her heels clicked on the asphalt, her breathing ragged. The grave was well kept. Fresh flowers lay on the black marble. Apparently, her mother had visited recently, but no one was there now. Althea sank onto the bench next to the grave. Tears rolled down her cheeks on their own. "Daddy, how could she do this?" she whispered, looking at her father's photo on the monument. "Where could Mama have gone? I didn't mean to hurt her. I'm just tired of pretending everything is fine." Langston Vance looked out from the photo, stern and calm. Althea remembered how he always knew how to soothe her with one look, how he found the right words in a difficult moment. "What do I do?" she asked quietly. But no answer followed, of course. She sat for a few more minutes, wiped her tears, and stood up. She needed to act, not sit and cry. On the way home, Althea began calling hospitals. She was shaking at the thought that her mother might have been in an accident or had a heart attack. "Good afternoon. Did you have any women admitted today, approximately 79 years old?" "Beatrice Vance." "1 minute, let me check. No, we don't have such a patient." She called 4 hospitals. No results. Then Althea drove to the police station. The desk sergeant met her without enthusiasm, clearly busy with his own affairs. "I want to report a missing person," Althea said firmly. "Have a seat. When did the person go missing?" "This morning, or possibly during the night." "You don't know for sure?" The officer looked up at her. "This morning. I understand that legally you might wait, but she is 79. Althea's voice trembled. "She has heart problems." "All right, let's file a report." The officer took out a form. Name, age of the missing person. Beatrice Vance, 79 years old. Description? Well-groomed black woman. Althea tried to recall all details. Average height, about 5'5". Gray hair, usually wears it in a bun. Brown eyes, wears reading glasses. What was she wearing? I don't know. I left early in the morning, didn't see her. Does she have memory problems? A tendency to wander? No. Althea shook her head. No memory problems. She was always of sound mind. Maybe there was a conflict? A reason why she might have left? Althea fell silent. Yesterday's fight floated up in memory in full color. We had a disagreement last night, but that's no reason to disappear. I see. The officer wrote something down. Leave your contacts. We will look into it. But usually in such cases, people return on their own. Perhaps your mother just wants to teach you a lesson. Teach me a lesson? Althea felt anger boiling inside. She is 79, not 17. Nevertheless, it happens, the officer replied calmly. Go home, wait. If she doesn't appear in 24 hours, we will activate a wider search. Althea left the precinct, feeling devastated and helpless. She returned home, where a worried Martha had already turned on all the lights, as if bright light could help bring the missing mistress back. Nothing? The housekeeper asked hopefully. Nothing. Althea walked into the living room and sank onto the sofa. Maybe she went to one of the relatives? She has no close relatives except me, Althea answered wearily. Martha, did you notice anything strange in her behavior lately? No, Ms. Vance. Mrs. Beatrice was as usual. True, the last few days she seemed a bit thoughtful, but I didn't attach any importance to it. Althea took out her phone and started calling hospitals, morgues, and urgent care centers again. With every negative answer, the panic grew. In the evening, Elias called. Ms. Vance, how are things? Has your mother been found? No. Althea's voice sounded hollow. Elias, cancel all my meetings for tomorrow too. I can't think about work when I don't know where my mother is. Of course. Maybe organize an announcement or hire private detectives? Detectives? Yes, that's a good thought. I'll handle that first thing in the morning. Althea didn't sleep all night. She sat in the armchair in the living room, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the phone, hoping it would ring, that her mother would call and say everything was fine, that she just wanted to be alone. But the phone was silent. The same thought spun in her head. What if I never see her again? What if the last words we said to each other were full of anger and resentment? Althea closed her eyes, and tears flowed down her cheeks again. For the first time in many years, she felt so helpless. She could control the company, close deals, solve problems, but how to find a person who simply vanished? 3 days passed since Beatrice's disappearance, and Althea felt like she was slowly losing her mind. The police were working, but without much enthusiasm. Too many missing people, too few resources. Every day she called the precinct, and every day she got the same answer. Operational search measures are underway. Please wait. Althea sat in her office, staring out the window at the gray autumn sky. Untouched documents lay on the desk before her. The computer was on, but she couldn't force herself to work. Every time she tried to focus on numbers and reports, her mother's face floated before her eyes. The door to the office opened quietly, and Elias entered with another folder of papers. "Ms. Vance, you need to sign—" "Elias," Althea interrupted him without taking her eyes off the window. "Do you know any good private investigators?" Her assistant froze in the doorway. "Private investigators? You want to hire a private eye?" "The police work too slowly. I need a professional who will focus only on this case." She finally turned to him. Elias noticed the dark circles under her eyes, the pallor of her face. "Do you have contacts?" "There is one man," Elias nodded. "Silas Grange. Used to work in homicide, then went into private practice. Very meticulous and reliable. My brother went to him a couple of years ago when tracking down a debtor. Found him in a week. I need him, urgently." Althea reached for her phone. "Give me his number." Half an hour later, Detective Silas Grange was sitting in her office. A man of about 50 with piercing gray eyes and calm manners, he inspired confidence. He took out a notepad and pen. "Mr. Grange, I need your help," Althea began, trying to speak confidently, though her voice betrayed a tremor. "My mother disappeared 3 days ago." "Tell me in detail. When did you see her last?" "In the evening, the day before the disappearance. We argued." It was hard for Althea to admit this aloud. "The next morning I left for work early, didn't see her, and in the afternoon the housekeeper called and said Mama wasn't home." "What was the cause of the argument?" Althea clenched her fists. "I accused her of ruining my life, said that because of her I have no family. It was stupid, I shouldn't have—" "Ms. Vance," the detective interrupted gently, "I'm not judging you. I need facts to understand what might have happened. Could your mother have left under the influence of emotions?" "I don't know." Althea ran a hand over her face. "She was offended, that's for sure. But to just pick up and leave? She's 79. She has a heart condition." "Does she have relatives, friends she could turn to?" "I called everyone. No one has seen her. Friends say she didn't call." Silas Grange wrote down every word. "Money? Documents? What did she take with her?" "Nothing." Althea felt a lump rising in her throat. "Passport is in place. Phone is at home. Money too. The housekeeper says she didn't even take her favorite purse." "That is strange," the detective frowned. "Usually people planning to leave take documents and money. Describe your mother to me in more detail." "Habits. Places she liked to visit." Althea spent the next hour answering the detective's questions. She talked about how her mother loved visiting the cemetery, how she sometimes met friends at a cafe, how on Tuesdays she always went to church. "I will check all these places," promised Silas. "I'll also request surveillance footage in your neighborhood. Ms. Vance, I understand how hard this is for you, but try to remember, was there anything unusual in your mother's behavior recently?" Althea thought. "Martha, our housekeeper, said Mama was thoughtful the last few days, but I didn't attach importance to it. We barely spoke. I'm constantly at work." "All right, I will start work immediately. I'll keep you posted." The detective stood up. "And one more thing, don't lose hope. In my practice, there have been cases where people were found a month later, or even 2. When Silas Grange left, Althea sank into her chair. She had hired the best detective. The police were working. Missing posters were pasted all over the city. What else could she do? The following days turned into agonizing waiting. Silas called every evening with reports, but there were no results. He checked all the cafes and churches, interviewed her mother's friends, reviewed footage. Beatrice Vance seemed to have dissolved into thin air. "I checked hospitals within a 100-mile radius," the detective said. "Also contacted colleagues in neighboring cities. Nothing." "How can a person just disappear?" Althea almost screamed into the receiver. "We live in the 21st century. There are cameras everywhere." "Unfortunately, not everywhere. There aren't many cameras in your residential area. The last thing I managed to establish, your mother left the house early in the morning, around 6 o'clock. Then the trail goes cold." Althea continued going to work because she didn't know how else to occupy herself. Sitting at home and waiting was unbearable. But work brought no relief either. She conducted negotiations, signed papers, met with partners. But all this happened as if underwater, in some unreal fog. "Ms. Vance, do you hear me?" The voice of a partner on the video call returned her to reality. "Yes, sorry. What were you saying?" "About the delivery deadlines. Do you agree with the proposed dates?" Althea looked at the screen, but the numbers and charts blurred before her eyes. "Yes, I agree. Elias will prepare the documents." When the connection cut off, she dropped her head into her hands. Her thoughts constantly returned to her mother. What if Beatrice left precisely because of their fight? What if the last words Althea said to her were so cruel that her mother decided, no, she couldn't even think about that? "Ms. Vance." Elias walked into the office with coffee. "Drink. You've eaten almost nothing all week." "Thank you." She took the cup, but didn't even touch the drink. "How are the searches? Has anything moved forward?" "No results." Althea's voice was lifeless. "Grange is working day and night, but nothing. I don't know what to do anymore." Elias sat on the edge of the desk. "Maybe we should cancel the meeting with the investors, or move it a few weeks later. You aren't in a state to lead such serious negotiations." Althea sharply raised her head. "Meeting with investors." She had completely forgotten. It was the most important deal of the year. The future of the company depended on it. "Right. The flight is today." "Elias, what time is it?" 2:30, and the flight is at 6, the assistant reminded her. "So the flight is in 3 hours." Althea grabbed her head. "God, I haven't even packed." "Ms. Vance," Elias said gently, "I can go alone, or we can reschedule. You don't have to." "No." She stood up abruptly. "I'm useless here anyway. The detective is working. The police are working. I'm just getting in the way, calling every 2 hours. The deal will happen. It's too important for the company. But if anything happens, Martha will be at home. She'll let me know if Mama shows up." Althea was already gathering documents into her bag. "I'll leave her all the contacts, and Silas Grange's too." "Are you sure?" Elias looked at her with doubt. "Negotiations will last more than a week, maybe 2. "I'm sure," Althea said decisively, though inside everything clenched with fear. To leave now when her mother was missing, it felt like betrayal. But the company, 200 people worked there. 200 families depended on her decisions. "Elias, order a car to the airport. I need to stop by the house, grab my things." "Okay, then see you at the airport." "Yes," she nodded, and they exchanged tense glances. At home, Althea packed a suitcase in a rush. Martha bustled nearby, helping fold clothes. "Ms. Vance, what about Mrs. Beatrice?" the housekeeper asked with anxiety. "Martha, I have a very important request for you." Althea stopped and took the woman by the hands. "If Mama appears, if there is any news, call me immediately. Any time of day or night. Understood?" Of course. Don't worry, I will right away. Here is the detective's number. Here is the precinct number." Althea wrote on a piece of paper. "If something happens and I'm not reachable, call them. You will return, right?" A plea sounded in Martha's voice. "Of course I'll return. Maximum 3 months." But even saying these words, Althea felt her heart constrict with pain. She called Silas Grange right from the car on the way to the airport. Detective, I am forced to leave on a business trip for 3 months, but I will be reachable 24 hours a day if you find out anything at all. I understand, Ms. Vance. Don't worry, I will continue the search. I have a few more leads to check. What leads? She gripped the phone. Too early to say. Don't want to give false hope, but I am working. Rest assured. Althea walked hurriedly through the airport parking lot, dragging her suitcase behind her. Elias had already gone inside, but she lingered to answer an urgent call from Silas. The conversation was short and fruitless. No new leads, no witnesses, nothing. Hanging up, she quickened her pace. Less than half an hour remained until check-in, and she couldn't be late. The investors wouldn't wait if she missed the flight. Near the entrance to the terminal, she noticed a woman, young, maybe 30, with a child in her arms. They were sitting on a concrete barrier. Something about this picture made Althea stop. The woman was dressed in a worn coat, clearly not her size. Her hair was disheveled, but her face was surprisingly beautiful, with regular features and large, dark eyes. And the baby in her arms, quite tiny, was wrapped in a thin blanket, clearly insufficient for the autumn weather. Althea was going to walk past. She had no time. She needed to hurry. But something forced her to linger. Maybe it was the woman's eyes, tired but full of some quiet dignity, or the way she tenderly pressed the child to herself, trying to warm him with her body. "Excuse me." Althea stepped closer. "Is everything okay?" The woman flinched and raised a wary gaze to her. "Yes, everything is fine," she answered quietly, instinctively pressing the baby tighter to her chest. "Forgive the intrusiveness, but do you have a place to stay?" The woman fell silent for a moment, as if debating whether to tell the truth to a stranger. Then she lowered her gaze. "Not right now, but we'll manage." Althea looked at the child, a boy, judging by the blue hat, sleeping with his face buried in his mother's shoulder. He was no more than a year old. And suddenly a thought flashed in Althea's mind. What if my mother is sitting somewhere like this too, lonely and helpless? What if someone is walking past her just as indifferently as most people are walking past this woman right now? "Listen." Althea dug in her purse and pulled out a set of keys. "I have a lake house upstate, about 40 miles from here. I'm flying away for a long time, several months. The house is empty. Do you want to live there?" The woman looked at her with such disbelief, as if Althea had offered her $1 million. "What? But why? You don't know me, and that matters." Althea held out the keys. "You have a small child. He needs a roof over his head. I have that roof, and right now no one needs it." I can't just take it." The woman was clearly bewildered. "This is too much." The baby in the woman's arms stirred and started crying softly. The mother began to rock him, and Althea saw her hands trembling, from cold or from fatigue. "I am flying away for negotiations for 3 months. Live at my lake house for now," Althea repeated, offering the keys again. 3 months? The woman still hesitated to take the keys. "But why are you doing this?" Althea thought about it. Indeed, why? She wasn't used to spontaneous decisions, especially like this. Letting a stranger into her home was reckless, but something inside told her it was right. "Because," she stumbled, "because my mother is missing right now, and I don't know where she is, or if she is okay, and I want to believe that if she is somewhere in need of help, someone will be nearby and help her, like I am helping you now." The woman slowly reached out and took the keys, her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't even know what to say. My name is Sienna, and this is Leo." "Althea," she introduced herself. "Listen, I need to run. I'm late for my flight, but I'll call my driver right now. He will take you." She dialed the number of Dante, her regular driver. "Dante, are you still in the parking lot?" "Yes, Ms. Vance. Did something happen?" "A woman with a small child is coming to the terminal entrance right now. Her name is Sienna. Drive them to the lake house, please." "To the lake house?" Surprise sounded in Dante's voice. "Yes." Althea quickly dictated instructions. and buy them everything they need. Groceries for the start, clothes for the child. It's clear they need everything. Baby food, diapers, whatever babies need. Understood. Everything will be done, Ms. Vance. Pulling up now. Althea turned to Sienna. You will be driven. There is everything necessary at the lake house. Linens in the closet in the bedroom, dishes in the kitchen. The heating is electric. You'll figure it out. I don't know how to thank you. Sienna looked at her as if seeing an angel. You saved our lives. Don't exaggerate. Althea smiled, though her soul was heavy. Just helped. She had already turned to go when Sienna called out to her. Althea, I hope they find your mom. They definitely will. Althea nodded, unable to say another word, and hurried into the terminal. At the check-in counter, Elias was already waiting for her nervously. Ms. Vance, where were you? 3 minutes until check-in closes. Sorry, got held up. She handed her documents to the agent. While they processed the luggage, Elias didn't take his studying gaze off her. Did something happen? No, yes, I just gave the keys to the lake house to a homeless woman with a child. Elias stopped dead in his tracks. You did what? Gave the keys to the lake house. Althea repeated calmly, taking her boarding pass. They will live there while I'm gone. But Elias was clearly trying to find words. Aren't you afraid to let strangers into the lake house? You don't know her at all. What if she... Well, I don't know, steals something or turns it into a drug den? Althea stopped and looked at him. No, I'm not afraid. The woman isn't guilty that her fate turned out this way. I'm sure she's good. Where does such confidence come from? Elias shook his head. Ms. Vance, you were always cautious in business, vetted every partner. And here, I just felt that I needed to help, Althea interrupted him. There were no lies in her eyes, Elias, only exhaustion and fear. And that baby, he was cold. How could I walk past? Elias sighed. All right, hope you're right. If only, because I don't want to deal with the consequences if you made a mistake. They passed through security and headed to the boarding gate. The waiting area was crowded and noisy. Althea sank into a chair, feeling fatigue roll over her. The last week had squeezed all the strength out of her. You're worried about your mother. That's why you helped that woman, Elias asked quietly, sitting down next to her. I don't know, Althea answered honestly. Maybe I just wanted to do something good. Maybe it's some form of atonement. Atonement? For what? For being a bad daughter, for the fact that the last words I said to Mama were cruel, for the fact that I'm flying away now instead of staying and searching for her. You are not a bad daughter. Elias shook his head. You are doing what you must. Must. Althea chuckled bitterly. I've been doing what I must all my life. And here is the result. Mama is missing. I have no family, just endless work. Boarding was announced. They stood up and headed to the gate. In line, Althea checked her phone again. No messages from Martha or the detective. On the plane, she settled by the window. Elias sat next to her and took out his laptop. Let's go through the presentation one more time, he suggested. Let's, Althea nodded, though she absolutely did not want to think about work. For the next hour, they discussed the project that was supposed to take the company to a new level. Elias showed charts and calculations, explained strategy, and Althea nodded and made notes, but her thoughts were far away. The plane took off, and Althea pressed her forehead against the cold porthole. Down below remained the city where her mother was. Or wasn't. With every day, hope melted. Ms. Vance, Elias called her. Are you listening? Sorry, got lost in thought. I asked, when do we contact Dante? I want to make sure he got that woman there. Good thought. Althea dialed the driver's number. Dante, how did everything go? Everything is great, Ms. Vance. Took Sienna and the baby to the lake house, helped them get settled. Then went to the supermarket, bought groceries, clothes for the kid. The woman was crying with gratitude. Thank you, Dante. I'll transfer the money for the purchases. Don't mention it. By the way, She's a good woman, intelligent. Told me a little about herself. She has a college degree, worked as an accountant, but her husband turned out to be a tyrant. Had to run. I see. Althea felt she hadn't been mistaken in her impulse. Dante, keep an eye on them, please. If they need anything, help out. Of course. Hanging up, Althea leaned back in the seat. Elias looked at her with curiosity. Well, satisfied? Yes, Althea smiled. You know, even in such a difficult period, it's nice to realize you could help someone. That is noble, agreed Elias, although still reckless. Every evening, being at the hotel, Althea called home. Martha always answered on the first ring, as if she didn't let the phone out of her hands. Martha, any news? No, Ms. Vance, none. Did the detective call? Yes, this morning. Says he is checking some new theory, but nothing concrete yet. The police found nothing either. Sorry, Ms. Vance. You aren't guilty of anything, Althea said wearily. Thank you for keeping me posted. The negotiations went hard. The investors nitpicked every number, demanded additional guarantees, set conditions. Althea conducted negotiations on autopilot, mechanically answering questions and putting forward counterarguments. Elias supported her as best he could, but even he saw that his boss was holding on with her last bit of strength. Ms. Vance, you did great today, he said, after another round of negotiations. Managed to convince them to lower the percentage. Yes, she answered indifferently, checking her phone. No messages. The chances that everything was okay with Beatrice decreased daily. Althea knew the statistics. The more time passes from the moment of disappearance, the lower the probability of finding the person alive and well. It made her sick. But she had to pull herself together, smile at investors, discuss contract terms, pretend everything was under control. And at night, she lay in the hotel room and stared at the ceiling, replaying the last conversation with her mother in her head. Every word, every intonation. And with every day, the weight of guilt became heavier. 6 months. Althea spent half a year in negotiations that were supposed to be the most important in her company's history. The investors turned out to be so demanding and cautious that every point of the contract was discussed for weeks. Initially, it was planned that everything would take 3 months, but negotiations dragged on, new conditions arose, additional meetings with partners in other cities were required. Now, finally, the plane landed in her home city, and Althea and Elias walked through the airport terminal with suitcases. The deal was closed, contracts signed. The company received investments that would allow it to expand and enter the international market. It was a victory, but Althea felt no joy. Ms. Vance, you are amazing. Elias walked beside her, not hiding his enthusiasm. You handled this. Honestly, there were moments I thought they would refuse, but you convinced them. That is your merit too, Elias. Althea smiled wearily and patted her assistant on the shoulder. You helped me persuade the investors, especially when it came to return on investment timelines. Without your calculations, we wouldn't have been able to convince them. Team, Elias answered modestly. We are a team. By the way, are you going home now or to the lake house? Althea stopped dead. The lake house. She had truly completely forgotten about it during these months. Right, I forgot I have guests living there. She smiled, shrugging her shoulders. Wonder how they are. Dante mentioned a couple of times that everything was fine. Maybe home first to rest, Elias suggested. No, Althea shook her head decisively. I'll go to the lake. I want to make sure everything is okay and get to know Sienna better. After all, she's been living in my house for half a year, and I haven't really spoken to her. They said goodbye at the exit. Elias took a taxi, and Althea called Dante. The driver arrived in 20 minutes, smiling joyfully. Miss Vance, I am so glad to see you. How did the negotiations go? Successfully, Dante. Tired, of course, but the result was worth it. Let's go to the lake house. The lake house? Not home? No, I want to check how things are. By the way, how is Sienna? How is the baby? Oh, everything is excellent. Dante perked up. Sienna is such a wonderful woman, hardworking, neat. The house is always in order, and she found a job at the local store. Micah is growing by leaps and bounds, already started walking. Already walking? Althea was surprised. How old was he when I left? 10, 11 months. Now he's a year and 5, such a sharp little boy. They drove onto the highway. Familiar landscapes flashed outside the window. The city gradually gave way to suburbs, then fields and forest. Althea looked out the window and thought about her mother. Over these 6 months, the trail had gone completely cold. Silas Grange continued working for the first 3 months, but then admitted he had hit a dead end. The police found nothing either. The case of Beatrice Vance's disappearance was gradually moving to the archives. Althea learned to live with this pain. She no longer cried every night, didn't flinch at every phone ring. She simply accepted it as a given. Her mother disappeared, and most likely she would never see her again. This thought was unbearable, but she had to live with it. The lake house was located in a picturesque spot, surrounded by pines. A 2-story house with a large veranda and a well-kept garden. Her father bought this place long ago, when Althea was still a teenager. Here they spent summers. Here they celebrated family holidays. After her father's death, Althea almost never came here. Too many memories. The car turned onto the familiar country road. A few minutes later, the house appeared, and Althea immediately noticed that something had changed. Flowers bloomed in the beds. The gate was freshly painted. New curtains hung in the windows. The place looked lived in, cozy. "See?" said Dante contentedly. "Sienna really looks after the house well." They got out of the car. Althea looked around. Even the paths were swept, the grass trimmed. She headed toward the house when suddenly she heard a child's laughter drifting from the garden. Rounding the house, Althea came out to the gazebo that stood at the edge of the property near a small pond, and what she saw made her freeze in place. In the gazebo, in a wicker chair, sat an elderly woman in a light dress. On her lap sat a toddler with dark curls, and the woman was telling him something, pointing at the ducks swimming in the pond. The child laughed, clapping his hands. Althea felt the ground slipping from under her feet. She knew this woman. She would know her among thousands of others. "Mama!" The voice sounded hoarse, barely audible. The woman raised her head and looked at Althea. The face was painfully familiar, the same brown eyes, the same elegant nose, the same thin lips, but there was no recognition in the eyes, only mild curiosity. "What?" asked Beatrice, tilting her head. "Do we know each other? You said Mama?" Althea took a step forward, then another step. Her legs were giving way, her heart pounding wildly. "Mama, it's me, Althea, your daughter." Beatrice looked at her closely, as if trying to remember, then slowly shook her head. "Forgive me, but I don't know you." "You must be mistaken, ma'am." Althea sighed heavily, not understanding what was happening. 6 months of searches, 6 months of despair and hope, and her mother had been here all this time, at the lake house, 50 miles from home. At that moment, Sienna came out of the house with a large pot in her hands. Seeing Althea, she smiled. "Oh, you're back. Welcome home." She put the pot on the table in the gazebo. "Will you have lunch with us? I just made soup." "Sienna." Althea pointed at her mother with a trembling hand. "This woman, how is she here?" "Ah, Mrs. B." Sienna looked at the elderly woman with tenderness. "She's been living with us for many months now. Why?" The baby on Beatrice's lap waved a hand at Althea. "Sienna." Althea walked closer. Her voice trembled. "This is my mother. Beatrice Vance. This is my mother." Sienna froze, the pot nearly falling from her hands. "So this is your mom?" Sienna was surprised, shifting her gaze from Althea to Beatrice. "My God, I didn't know." She walked out of the house and disappeared 6 months ago. Althea spoke incoherently, tears already rolling down her cheeks. "Police searched, private detective. No one could find her, and I was so worried. Thought I lost her forever." Sienna sank onto the bench as if her legs wouldn't hold her. "Sienna, please." Althea grabbed her hands. "Tell me how she ended up here." Okay, Sienna nodded. "Sit down. I'll tell you everything. Bea, dear, can you play with Leo a little longer?" "Of course." Beatrice smiled at the baby. "We will feed the ducks." "Yes, sunshine." Althea sat opposite Sienna. Her hands were shaking, and she clenched them into fists to stop the tremors. "Tell me everything from the beginning." "It was a few days after you gave us the keys," Sienna began. "I remember exactly 4 days passed. Leo and I went for a walk to the river. There's a very beautiful spot not far from here where you can sit on the bank, and suddenly I saw this woman." "Where exactly?" Althea interrupted. "By the bridge. She was standing in the middle of the road and looked lost. I initially wanted to walk past, but she was so scared. I went up and asked if she needed help. She looked at me with such lost eyes and asked, 'Where is the house? I am looking for the house.'" Althea listened, not breathing. "I asked which house. She named the street and number. 'This street, this house.'" Sienna pointed to the lake house. "I was shocked. I said, 'Well, I live in this house. Come on, I'll walk you.' We brought her here and she started crying. She walked into the house, looked around, and burst into tears. Said, 'I know this place. I was here. We were here with Langston.' She constantly repeated that name, Langston. "Langston is my father," Althea said quietly. "He died when I was 25, 30 years ago." "See?" Sienna nodded. "She lives in the past, remembers her husband, remembers her youth. But everything that happened after his death, she doesn't remember." Althea looked at her mother, who was cheerfully talking to the toddler. "At all? At all?" I tried to ask her about family, about home. She described the apartment where she lived with her husband, described her work. She was a teacher, right? But about you, about the fact that she has a daughter, nothing, as if it didn't happen. "Need to show her to a doctor." Althea wiped her tears. "Urgently. This is memory loss. Maybe trauma? Maybe she fell, hit her head?" "I took her to a doctor," said Sienna. "A week after I found her, to the local general practitioner. He said tests and scans were needed, but Beatrice refused, was afraid of hospitals. I couldn't force her." "It's okay, I'll find a good doctor." Althea was already making plans. "We'll do all tests, scans, find out what happened to her." They sat in silence for a few minutes. Althea couldn't tear her gaze away from her mother. Beatrice held Leo in her arms and showed him how to throw breadcrumbs to the ducks. The baby laughed, and her mother smiled with such a soft, happy smile. "So, all this time, she has been living here with you?" Althea finally asked. "Yes," Sienna nodded. "I couldn't leave her alone, you understand? She was so lost, so helpless. I decided I would stay with her until someone from her family was found. I didn't know it was your mother." "And how did you live? On what?" Althea remembered Dante talking about a job. "I found a job at a store, here in the village not far. The owner, a wonderful man, allowed me to bring Leo with me. The pay isn't big, but it was enough for us. Beatrice helped around the house, cooked, cleaned. She cooks beautifully, by the way." Sienna smiled. "And she watched Leo when I was at work. He got so attached to her. Calls her Grandma." "Grandma," repeated Althea, and a new wave of tears rose to her throat. She doesn't remember her own daughter, but cares for a stranger's child. "Althea," Sienna leaned forward. "I don't know what to say. I am so sorry. If I knew it was your mother, I would have contacted you immediately." "You aren't guilty," Althea shook her head. "You saved her. You gave her shelter, cared for her. Sienna, thank you so huge that you didn't abandon my mom, that you looked after her all these months." "Thank you." Tears appeared in Sienna's eyes. "You sheltered me and Leo when we were left with absolutely nothing. You didn't even know us, but you helped. And I simply couldn't abandon an elderly woman who needed help." They hugged, both crying from relief, from happiness, from everything experienced over these months. "Sienna," Althea pulled back, "this isn't my business, and you don't have to answer if you don't want to. But how did you end up on the street with a child? What happened?" Sienna wiped her tears and took a deep breath. "I was married to a wealthy man, Richard. We met when I was working at his company. He was charming, generous, courted beautifully. I fell in love." She fell silent. Her gaze became distant. "The wedding was lavish. He bought me a condo, a car, clothes. I thought it was love. But after Leo was born, everything changed. He started getting jealous of the baby, said I was giving him too much attention, and then he started hitting." "God," whispered Althea. "At first rarely, then more and more often. He controlled my every step. I couldn't leave the house without his permission, couldn't call friends. My parents died, and my brother lives overseas. I was all alone, and I was afraid he would kill me, or even worse, do something to Leo." Sienna ran a hand over her face, brushing away new tears. "I saved money little by little, hid it, saved for 6 months. And when I saved enough for a bus ticket, I ran, just took Leo and left while he was at work. Went to the station and got on the first bus that was leaving. Didn't even know where it was going. Just went wherever my eyes looked, and then met you." "Is he looking for you?" asked Althea. "I don't know. Probably. The store owner hired me off the books, so Richard couldn't find me through databases." Althea thought, "You know, Sienna, let's switch to first names. I think after everything we've been through, it's appropriate." "Okay," smiled Sienna. "I have a proposal." Althea looked her in the eyes. "I want to offer you a job in my company, on normal terms with official registration and a good salary. You said you worked as an accountant." "Yes, but—" "No buts. You saved my mother, cared for her when I didn't even know where she was. I am the one who should be grateful to you, and also, I want to take you all home. Mama, you, Leo. I have a big house. There's enough room for everyone. Leo will be better off in the city, more opportunities, good doctors, daycare." "Althea." Sienna looked at her with amazement. "That is too much. You have already done so much for us." "It isn't too much. It is right," said Althea. "Mama will be with me. You will work. We'll hire a nanny for Leo for the time you're at work. And when he gets older, preschool, everyone will be busy, all together, like a family." "Like a family," repeated Sienna, and tears flowed down her cheeks again. "I have dreamed of a real family for so long." They had lunch all together at the big table in the gazebo. Beatrice told stories about her youth, about how she met Langston, how they drove down south for their honeymoon. She spoke vividly, with a smile, and it seemed she had truly returned to that happy time. Althea listened and cried, trying to do it unnoticeably. Her mother was alive, was nearby, but at the same time, she wasn't. The woman sitting opposite didn't remember her, didn't recognize her. It was happiness and tragedy simultaneously. The next day, Althea summoned the city's best neurologist to the lake house. The doctor conducted an exam, asked many questions, ordered tests and scans. "Judging by the symptoms, your mother suffered a TIA, a mini stroke," he told Althea privately. "It happened most likely at the moment of disappearance or shortly before. A mini stroke can proceed almost asymptomatically. The person doesn't always even understand what happened to them, but the consequences can be serious. In your mother's case, the areas of the brain responsible for long-term memory were affected." "So she will never remember me?" Althea's voice trembled. "I can't say for sure. The brain is a complex system. Sometimes memory is restored partially or completely, sometimes not. It takes time, rehabilitation, support of loved ones. I will prescribe treatment, vitamins, nootropics, and most importantly, surround her with familiar things, photographs, stories. This can help." A week later, they moved to the city house. Althea gave Sienna and Leo a separate suite on the second floor. She hired a nanny for Leo and processed Sienna into the company as an accountant. Sienna turned out to be an excellent employee, attentive, responsible, a fast learner. Elias, who initially treated her with distrust, admitted a month later that it was a successful decision. Leo, while his mom was at work, stayed home with the nanny and Beatrice. The elderly woman grew attached to the boy and cared for him with such tenderness that the nanny often joked, "I have nothing to do here. Mrs. Beatrice does everything herself." Gradually, very slowly, memory began to return. First, Beatrice remembered her friend Elizabeth, then the address of the house where she lived with her daughter. Then Althea herself. It happened 3 months after the move. Althea came home from work, and her mother met her at the threshold with a smile. "Althea, my daughter," she said simply. "How I missed you." And they hugged, both crying from happiness. Beatrice didn't remember the details of the last 30 years, but she remembered the main thing, that she had a daughter whom she loved. Now they all lived together in the big house. Sienna worked and gradually gained confidence in herself. Leo grew into a healthy and happy boy. Beatrice was recovering and remembered something new every day. For the first time in many years, Althea felt she had a real family. Not the one dictated by obligations and duty, but one created by love and mutual support. I'm really glad you're here and that I could share my story with you. If you liked it, show me by liking the video and subscribing to my channel. Let's see how many of us there are. Write in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is. I'm so curious to know where all you wonderful people are tuning in from. If you want to support me a little extra, you can also send a small donation. I share new life stories for you every single day. And now 2 of my most popular stories will pop up on the screen, so you can choose what to watch next.